What does bad parenting hide from you behind the scenes and off camera? In Bad Parenting, you'll play as Ron, a chipper kid awaiting a visit from a mysterious Mr. Redface. Ron's dad isn't delighted to learn of this uninvited guest, and so begins a tragic spiral into the horrific events awaiting Ron. Traveling to another dimension, you'll attempt to rescue your kidnapped parents, your only companion being a creepy doll who's coincidentally also named Ron. Today we'll be taking a look behind the scenes of this eerie adventure as we search for things we're not usually meant to see, like how Mr. Redface functions outside the player's view, and another look at the bizarre spell used to destroy him. We've got lots to see, so I hope you enjoy today's dive into Bad Parenting, if that's even possible. As usual, I'll be hitting you with a quick recap of the game's events, so we're caught up on what we'll be covering. So as the game starts, your mother enters the house and apparently forgot about your birthday. She tells you about Mr. Redface, a man who enters the house to bring gifts for sleeping children. Your dad angrily sends you to bed, and after a visit from Mr. Redface, you meet your new doll, Ron. He conjures infinite lasagna, followed by a jump scare from Mr. Redface. Ron tells you that Mr. Redface kidnapped your dad, and so you use a radio to activate a portal in the closet, invoking the wrong portal at first, and then a demonic woman by mistake. We'll leave the recap there for now, and head back to the start of the game. With the game restarted, we can now get a good look at the player, as well as Ron's dad. The game typically has a pretty heavy, low-res filter applied, so you can never see what these characters look like fully. During this time, we can also have a good look at the entire map from above, and in doing so, you'll see something pretty interesting. The third bedroom just doesn't exist. Each of the rooms occupies the space at the same time, but this door was only a fake, and the space between the bedroom and kitchen is hollow. When the front door is singing for some reason, we can watch from outside the map as it just swings open and closed repeatedly. As Ron's mother enters the house, she appears instantly instead of walking through the door. After learning about Mr. Redface, Ron's dad then leans down in your face to send you off to bed. The pose he assumes is a bit crazy when viewed from different angles, but then again, we won't ever see it from this perspective, so it doesn't really matter. Ron's model has unloaded by this point as well, and the player controller has become active so we can explore the map. There isn't much to do besides go to bed now, and as we do, Mr. Redface will be loaded into the hallway where Ron's parents are still currently standing. We can't get a good look at him now without the post-processing effects muddling his appearance. He looks a lot different than I expected, and almost resembles a villain from Courage the Cowardly Dog. This angry Eustace doppelganger remains still for a moment as a bit of fog appears in the hallway, and then he begins sliding towards our bedroom door. He'll freeze in front of our room, standing inside the weirdly isolated fog as he waves at us, teleporting into our bedroom holding the doll. Shortly after, he starts moving towards our closet, clipping through it as he turns back to look at Ron, and grabbing the closet doors as we're teleported into the following map. It would be hard to tell while playing, but this entire game takes place in 10 maps in total, each loading in at different times, and containing assets used in that particular scene. Now that we've loaded into the next level, we'll pick up Ron and head off for our strangely magical lunch. While Ron does have a model used throughout this game, the player is completely invisible during the majority of gameplay. We can only see ourselves here because we're carrying the doll. Otherwise, we'd be basically non-existent. In the kitchen, there are a couple of things we can check out. The first being that Mr. Redface is currently sitting at the table. We just can't see him at the moment. By hacking him into the game early, he'll just sit in the chair in front of our doll with his hand held out. His feet are clipping through the floor, and he's holding this static pose, something we only see for a brief moment during the jump scare. As for our enchanted leftovers, each time Ron takes a bite, it diminishes a bit, but it's not actually going anywhere. The food on our plate is just clipping down through the dish and into the table, eventually fading back into its original position, effectively creating infinite lasagna, or whatever this is. They never made that clear. The jump scare itself isn't all that exciting, since Mr. Redface just kind of appears and the bottle breaks shortly after, but this is what it looks like from another angle. At this point in the game, there are two versions of Ron the doll loaded in at the same time, one sitting at the table and the other in your parents' room. I also force-spawned the version of the doll that appears next to the TV, and when interacting with it, the dialogue plays out of order. This ended up soft-locking my game for some reason, and I had to restart this level in order to continue. By this point, our doll informs us that our dad has been taken by Mr. Redface, and we'll have to rescue him by using a portal in the closet. As soon as we turn the radio on and open the doors, the forced portal will appear behind the closed doors. By moving the portal into the void space out of bounds, we can get a better look at it, and its digitized appearance looks like something out of Donkey Kong Country or similar SNES titles. With the closet doors deleted, we can watch as the demonic woman appears when we activate the radio a second time, and she's not exactly easy to look at with the lights on. I'm not sure who or what this character is supposed to be, but she looks like something out of a horror movie, and I'm not here for it. Finally, we'll properly spawn the portal that will eventually lead to our father's rescue, but I wanted to mess with things a bit before going through it. So after moving this large white panel across the room, I realized that this is a single-face object with collision on only one side. We can't interact with it in any way, and it definitely doesn't warp us anywhere. And that's because during gameplay, we're interacting with the closet and not the portal itself. By walking to the empty closet, we can still activate it and warp into the following level. Meaning, Ron was right. The closets do function as portals. Everything else is just for show. Jumping back into recap mode, the portal leads you to the strange forest where the clerk, a purple cat named Cat, helps locate Ron's father. A portal is then opened here, and a group of kids leap out to scare you as you approach. As we leave, we'll be transported to a textureless room, where our father is laying on a bed, trembling in fear. You grab a spell from the table, get jump scared by a giant hand, and awaken in your parents' closet only to get jump scared again when returning to your bedroom. With your mother now missing, you head back through the portal and use the spell in this similar default textured room to hopefully destroy Mr. Redface. Once again, we'll leave the recap there for now and jump back in time. So after heading through the portal and arriving at this new location, we can take a look from an aerial view, only to find that this entire forest is a small box and octagon and nothing more. Within the map, there are a few things worth mentioning. The first being the kids who seemingly appear from thin air to jump scare you. Each of the locations they eventually end up in are currently empty, but we can force them to spawn early, which kinda messes things up. The kid who jumps into our face is currently standing in the fire, asserting dominance in the most hardcore way possible. The girl wearing the polka-dotted shirt is close to our normal location, except she's in her default pose, clipping to the floor. The third child is also present, they're just stuck in the trunk of the car, since it hasn't opened yet. While messing around with things, I spawned the exit portal much earlier than I was supposed to. But they didn't just let me get away with a sequence break. When I interacted with the portal, I was instantly warped back to Cat on the other side of the map, and their dialogue started as though we interacted with them directly. I finished the dialogue and went back to the portal, getting jump scared by the children as expected. Watching this sequence from another angle, their weird placements earlier make a bit more sense, since this animation starts in those spots. Heading through the portal for real this time, we'll end up in this weird default textured room where Ron's dad is laying on the world's largest bed. This room is the entirety of what makes up this level, and there's nothing else beyond the walls of this tiny space. Upon closer inspection, your dad doesn't have any pupils in this scene, which is somehow even creepier. While we're here, we can hack this giant hand into the game early for a much better look at it. This huge limb is usually only seen for a very brief second, but we can now see it in all its glory. It has a lengthy arm behind it that seems to come through the portal, but moving out of bounds reveals that the arm just comes to an end out of sight. When we turn around, the wrist stretches weirdly, and the hand itself covers the player camera. We're now warped back home as the next scene loads in. As you awaken in the no longer interdimensional closet, your mother gives you a proper scolding, and her neck twists sideways in this freaky pose. At this point, we're supposed to go back to our room, but I instead move the camera there to find the doll floating in place. The jump scare can't trigger by moving the camera up close, so I was able to hack Mr. Redface into the scene before entering the room. You would have never known he was standing in front of the closet asserting dominance in the ethereal plane, but now you know. Glorious. Walking into the room, I was able to trigger the jump scare as we typically would, and we can watch as Mr. Redface snaps into his regular pose where he's holding our doll. He then reappears to attack Ron, and what's funny is that his head stretches forward as he holds this weird Superman pose before unloading. When you awaken post jump scare, Ron's mother is kneeling beside the bed as she attempts to console you. Kneeling is a bit of an overstatement here, since moving the camera reveals that she's still standing up, and her legs are clipping through the bottom of the level. Once again, you'll never see this from a different perspective during gameplay, so there's no reason not to do it this way, despite how funny it looks here. After heading back to our bedroom, we'll find our doll sitting next to the closet, and after interacting with them, our character will appear A-posing in front of them. Since the retro filter is disabled, we can see how badly our poor doll has been damaged, and he's definitely been in better condition. Since your mother has also gone missing, you'll now go back through the portal with the intention of destroying Mr. Redface using the spell we picked up earlier. While we're entering the same map as before, it's a separate scene that contains a different batch of assets entirely. For one, on the far side of the level, we can have a look at this room that we throw the spell into. The black silhouette seen inside is in fact Ron's mother, and up close we can see them fully illuminated in this hunched over position. Just outside the door, we can once again find Mr. Redface T-posing in the multiverse, and speaking of which, we can also watch from another perspective as he makes his way to the door. He begins this animation out of the player's sight, walking over to the door where he'll vanish just outside. When the spell activates, a bright green light appears in the room as Ron's mother disappears. disappears, and the area goes dark afterwards. At this point, if we try to bring Redface back, he'll remain completely frozen next to the door. Back into our recap once more, you'll head back home to find Ron's parents arguing at the front door. Your mother leaves, which results in your dad getting angry and becoming Redface. Heading back to the bedroom, you'll watch as your dad, now revealed as Mr. Redface, kills you and leaves you in the closet. Opening said closet reveals your body, and a scene plays out where your dad is tormented by your spirit. Your mom then goes to the police station, and the spell you threw into the room was really a card revealing your dad's hiding place. Your father gets arrested, and during Ron's funeral, the children from before invite him to stay with them, bringing bad parenting to an end. So rewinding time, the first thing we'll encounter is Ron's parents engaging in a heated debate. Things turn a bit too aggressive here, but when viewing this from another angle, I made a crazy realization. When Ron's dad swings his hand, we'll find that his mother is so hardcore, she doesn't even flinch or react. And if that wasn't enough, she also clips her arms through her own torso and warps through the door, refusing to elaborate before she eventually unloads. When our dad is drinking at the table, we can see from this angle that the bottle impales his face every time he takes a drink. His face will turn red, and he starts walking down the hallway, glitching around as he makes his way to Ron's bedroom. When he gets close to the door, it will swing open, as both Ron and his dad appear standing atop of the bed, waiting for the player to trigger the cutscene. This sequence is a bit too grim in my opinion, so I chose to take matters into my own hands and fix it myself. By removing Ron from the situation entirely, his dad just kind of moves around weirdly, still sitting on the bed. It kind of looks like he's singing opera, which is definitely better than the original scene, but even so, it's still odd to watch. He transforms into Mr. Redface and leaves the bed, vanishing before approaching the closet. At this point, we're supposed to find our own body when opening the closet doors, but looking inside early shows us that his body isn't loaded in yet. Only after the player opens the door will it appear, and it's no easier to look at with the retro filter turned off. This isn't the only asset that appeared when we opened the closet though, since the entirety of the motel bedroom our dad is hiding in appeared at the same time. I expected this area to be contained in its own scene like the previous version, but it's only a short sequence without player input, so there was no reason to load in a whole new level. During this cutscene, Ron does something off screen that results in his father screaming, but if we watch from another angle, nothing happens, and he remains completely still. The following cutscene is viewed from the perspective of Ron's mother, but there's something you may have missed here. Ron is lying in the bed on the opposite side of the room, though he's partially transparent, which I believe is because he's a ghost. I completely missed this during my playthrough, and it's a pretty cool detail that's super easy to overlook. Ron's mother then opens a closet in the bedroom to find his body, but as you can see, he's clearly not even there. It looks a bit silly, since she's basically sobbing in front of an empty closet, and without context, this would be pretty hard to explain. But don't worry, it gets weirder. Similar to the motel, the police interview also takes place within this same scene. A second copy of Ron's mother occupies this area, alongside, two Slendermen? I'm sure these characters are just meant to be ambiguous, but a faceless character wearing a black uniform is Slenderman enough for me. As Ron's funeral begins, we are loaded into a new scene full of more Slendermen, but strangely enough, we are still in the house. Most of the map has been unloaded to the point it's only a long hallway with a few disconnected walls here and there. That's not all though. The forest we warped to previously is also loaded in, just outside of the funeral procession. The kid in the closet is always loaded in too. The camera just doesn't pan this way until the end of the scene. With the story wrapped up, we can have a look at the fan arts room, and this is basically a model viewer where the various characters are on display. There is some questionable art here, but the giant heads at the ends of this hallway are what really interests me. From another angle, these aren't simply giant heads, but straight up Attack on Titan monstrosities. The models in this game are pretty freaky, but this is taking it a step too far. But it's still glorious. And with that, that's everything I found off camera and out of bounds and bad parenting. If you enjoyed today's look behind the scenes, make sure you subscribe so you won't miss my next game-breaking video. Cheers!